The wagon wheel cracked apart on the rocky trail, just as the sun began its descent behind the jagged peaks, and Thea Turner knew she was in serious trouble. She had been traveling alone for 3 weeks, hauling supplies from Denver to the mining camp, where her late husband's claim still sat untended. The August heat of 1876 had been brutal, and now, staring at the splintered wood scattered across the ground, she felt the weight of every decision that had led her to this moment. Her hands were already blistered from the rains, her back ached from sleeping on the hard ground, and her provisions were running dangerously low. Thea climbed down from the wagon seat, her boots hitting the dirt with a soft thud. She circled the wagon, assessing the damage with a practiced eye. The wheel was beyond repair without proper tools, and even then, she would need help lifting the wagon to replace it. The spare wheel lay strapped beneath the wagon bed, mocking her with its accessibility and her inability to use it alone. She refused to panic. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. The trail stretched ahead toward Granite, Colorado, still a good 15 miles distant according to her map. Behind her, the path wound back through wilderness she had barely survived crossing. The mountains rose on either side, their pine-covered slopes darkening as evening approached. Thea pulled her worn hat from her head and wiped the sweat from her brow. Her dark hair, pinned in a practical bun, had come loose in strands that stuck to her neck. She was 24 years old, and she had been handling problems on her own since she was 16. This was just another obstacle. She would figure it out. She began unhitching the horses, deciding to make camp here for the night. Tomorrow, in daylight, she would devise a plan. Perhaps she could rig some kind of lever system to lift the wagon high enough to remove the broken wheel. She had rope, and there were plenty of sturdy trees nearby. As she worked, the forest around her came alive with evening sounds. Birds called their final songs before settling for the night. Somewhere in the distance, a stream babbled over rocks. The air began to cool, bringing relief from the oppressive heat. Thea was leading the second horse to a patch of grass when she heard the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats approaching. Her hand instinctively went to the rifle she kept strapped to her saddle, but she did not draw it. Not yet. The rider appeared around a bend in the trail, and Thea felt her breath catch despite herself. He was enormous, sitting astride a massive roan horse that looked barely large enough to carry him. His shoulders were impossibly broad beneath a leather vest that had seen better days, and his arms, exposed by rolled-up sleeves, were thick with muscle that suggested a life of hard labor. Long, dark hair fell past his shoulders, partially obscuring a face that was all hard angles and sun-bronzed skin. A thick beard covered his jaw, and his eyes, when they fixed on her, were a startling shade of blue-gray. He looked like he had stepped out of the mountains themselves, wild and untamed. The man slowed his horse, his gaze sweeping over the scene. The broken wagon, the unhitched horses, and Thea standing there with her hand near her rifle. "Evening," he said, his voice deep and rough, like gravel underfoot. "Evening," Thea replied, keeping her tone neutral. She had learned long ago that showing weakness to strangers on the trail was dangerous, but so was showing too much hostility. The man dismounted in one fluid motion despite his size, his boots hitting the ground with authority. He stood at least 6 feet tall, perhaps more, and the muscles in his arms flexed as he tied his horse to a nearby tree. "You have trouble," he observed, nodding toward the broken wheel. "Nothing I cannot handle," Thea said automatically. The words had become her refrain, her shield against a world that wanted to tell her what she could and could not do. The man walked closer, his movements surprisingly quiet for someone his size. He crouched beside the broken wheel, examining the damage with careful attention. His hands were huge, scarred, and calloused, the hands of someone who worked with them every day. "This wheel is finished," he said, stating the obvious. "You have a spare." "I do. You need help getting it on." It was not a question, but Thea bristled anyway. "I can manage." The man stood, turning to face her fully. Up close, she could see the weathering on his face, the lines around his eyes that suggested he spent most of his time outdoors. He could have been anywhere from 25 to 35. The wilderness aged men differently than city life did. "No disrespect meant," he said, his voice carrying a hint of something that might have been amusement. "But that wagon weighs more than you do, and the spare is trapped underneath. You would need to lift one side high enough to slide it out, then keep it lifted while you remove the broken wheel and attach the new one. That is a two-person job at minimum." Thea wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She had been trying to puzzle out the logistics for the past hour, and every solution she conceived required either help or equipment she did not possess. "I appreciate the assessment," she said stiffly, "but I will figure something out." The man studied her for a long moment, and Thea felt uncomfortably exposed under that steady gaze. She lifted her chin, refusing to look away first. "My name is Warren Xander," he said finally. "I live about 5 miles north of here, up in the high country. I trap and hunt, sell furs and meat to the mining camps. I am heading to Granite in the morning with a load to trade. I can help you fix this wheel now, or I can ride on and leave you to your stubbornness. Either way, you will still be stuck here when full dark comes, and these mountains are not friendly after sunset." Thea felt her jaw tighten. She hated that he was right. She hated even more that she needed help, that despite all her preparations and determination, she had encountered a problem she genuinely could not solve alone. "Why would you help me?" she asked, her suspicion clear in her voice. Warren shrugged, his massive shoulders rising and falling. "Because you need it and I can. Does there need to be more reason than that? In my experience, yes." Something flickered across his face, something that might have been understanding or sadness. "I am not asking for payment if that is your concern. I am not asking for anything at all. But night is coming fast, and I have the tools and strength to fix this in 20 minutes. You can accept the help or not. Your choice." Thea looked at the broken wheel, then at the darkening sky, then back at Warren. Everything in her rebelled against accepting assistance. She had built her life on the principle of self-reliance, on never owing anyone anything. After her husband died 6 months ago, leaving her with nothing but debts and a worthless mining claim, she had vowed never to depend on anyone again. But she was not a fool. Refusing help out of pure pride when the alternative was spending the night stranded on a dangerous trail was not strength. It was stupidity. "All right," she said, the words feeling like broken glass in her mouth. "I would appreciate your help." Warren nodded once, as if the matter was settled. "I have a jack in my pack that will make this easier. Let me get it." He returned to his horse and began unpacking supplies with efficient movements. Thea watched despite herself, noting the way he moved with complete confidence, every action purposeful. He pulled out a sturdy metal jack, several tools, and a lantern that he lit against the gathering darkness. "What is your name?" he asked as he positioned the jack beneath the wagon frame. "Thea Turner. You are heading to Granite." "Yes, I have business there." Warren glanced at her but did not press for details. Instead, he began working the jack, slowly lifting the wagon. The muscles in his arms and shoulders bunched and flexed with the effort, and Thea found herself staring before she caught herself and looked away. "Can you slide that spare wheel out once I get this high enough?" he asked. "Yes." They worked in tandem, Warren managing the heavy lifting while Thea handled the parts she could manage. He was right about the time. Within 20 minutes, the new wheel was securely attached and the wagon sat level once more. Warren stood back, wiping his hands on his pants. That should hold you to granite and beyond, assuming you do not hit any more rough patches. Thank you, Thea said, and she meant it despite her reluctance. I truly do appreciate it. You are welcome. He began packing his tools back onto his horse. You should not camp here tonight. There are better spots closer to water and the predators use this trail for hunting after dark. Thea felt her stomach sink. Of course there was something else. How far to a better camp? About a mile north. There is a clearing near Granite Creek with good grass for your horses and a rock face that will put your back to something solid. I camp there sometimes when I am heading to town. The thought of moving the wagon again after finally getting it fixed made Thea want to weep with exhaustion. But she had asked for his assessment, and he had no reason to lie. I will head there then, she said. Warren mounted his horse with that same fluid grace. I will ride ahead and make sure the spot is clear. Follow the trail north. You cannot miss the turnoff. Before Thea could respond, he had urged his horse forward and disappeared into the growing darkness. She stood alone on the trail, listening to the fading hoofbeats, feeling strangely bereft. Then she shook herself, irritated by the reaction. She had just met the man, and she would likely never see him again after tonight. There was no reason to feel anything at all. Thea hitched her horses back to the wagon and climbed onto the seat. The new wheel rolled smoothly as she guided the team north, following Warren's directions. True to his word, she found the turnoff easily, a narrow path that led down to a wide clearing beside a rushing creek. Warren had already built a fire and was tending to his horse when she arrived. The flames cast dancing shadows across his face, highlighting the strong lines of his features. You found it, he said unnecessarily. Your directions were clear. Thea unhitched her horses again and led them to the creek to drink. When she returned, Warren had set up a simple camp on one side of the fire. She began unpacking her own supplies, setting them deliberately on the opposite side. You do not need to worry, Warren said, his tone carrying a hint of amusement again. I am not planning to attack you in your sleep. I never thought you were, Thea lied. You are lying, but that is all right. Caution is wise out here. Thea pulled out her small cooking pot and the meager supplies she had left, some dried beans, a bit of salt pork, and a few wizened vegetables. It would make a thin stew, but it would fill her stomach. I have fresh rabbit, Warren said, watching her preparations, and potatoes. More than I can eat alone. You are welcome to share. I have my own food. I can see that. I am still offering. Thea looked at her sad collection of provisions, then at the plump rabbits hanging from Warren's saddle. Her stomach growled audibly, betraying her. Why are you being so kind? She asked, genuinely confused. You do not know me. Warren was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the fire. I know what it is like to be alone out here. I know what it is like to be too proud to accept help even when you need it. And I know that sometimes the difference between surviving and not surviving is whether someone decides to be decent when they have the chance. His words struck something deep in Thea's chest, some locked-away place she tried not to acknowledge. She swallowed hard. I suppose sharing a meal would not be terrible, she said quietly. Warren's face broke into a smile, and Thea was startled by how it transformed him. The hard, wild mountain man suddenly looked almost boyish, despite his size and beard. Good, he said. I make a decent camp stew if I say so myself. He was not lying. Within an hour, the pot hanging over the fire bubbled with a rich, savory stew that made Thea's mouth water. Warren worked with the same efficient confidence he had shown with the wagon. his large hands surprisingly dexterous as he prepared the food. They ate in comfortable silence at first, the sounds of the forest and creek filling the spaces between them. Thea could not remember the last time food had tasted so good. "You are traveling alone," Warren said eventually. "That is unusual." "So are you. I live alone. It is different." Thea set down her bowl. "My husband died 6 months ago. He had a mining claim near Granite. I am going to see if there is anything worth salvaging before I decide what to do next. I am sorry for your loss. Do not be. It was not a happy marriage." The words came out more bitterly than Thea intended. She saw Warren's eyebrows rise slightly, but he did not comment. "Still," he said, "losing a partner is hard, regardless of the circumstances." "What about you?" Thea asked, wanting to shift the focus. "Why do you live alone up in the mountains?" Warren poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night. "I prefer the company of trees and animals to most people. They are more honest about their intentions." "That is a sad worldview." "Is it? You are the one traveling alone because you trust no one enough to ask for help." The observation struck too close to home. Thea felt her defenses rise immediately. "You know nothing about me. I know you would rather risk your safety than accept assistance. I know you carry yourself like someone who has been hurt and decided never to let it happen again. I know those things because I recognize them." Thea stared at him across the fire. "Then you understand why I am the way I am." "I do. I also know that being that way is lonely. Lonely is safe. Lonely is surviving, not living. There is a difference." Thea had no response to that. She finished her stew in silence, acutely aware of Warren's presence across from her. He was unsettling in ways she could not quite articulate. He was too perceptive, too willing to see through the walls she had carefully constructed. After they cleaned the dishes in the creek, Thea spread her bedroll near the wagon. Warren stayed on the opposite side of the fire, giving her space without her having to ask for it. She lay down fully clothed, her rifle within easy reach, and stared up at the stars visible through the pine branches. "Thea," Warren's voice came soft through the darkness. "Yes. Thank you for accepting my help today. I know it was not easy for you." Thea felt something strange twist in her chest. "Thank you for giving it, even when I was difficult about it." She heard what might have been a quiet chuckle, and then silence fell over the camp. Sleep was a long time coming. Thea lay awake, listening to the crackle of the fire and the sound of the creek and the steady breathing of the man across from her. She told herself she was being vigilant, staying alert in case of danger. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was afraid of something entirely different than physical harm. She was afraid of the small, treacherous part of her heart that had begun to hope. Morning came with birdsong and golden light filtering through the trees. Thea woke to find Warren already up, the fire rebuilt and coffee brewing in a battered pot. The smell alone was enough to make her forgive him for the awkward conversation of the night before. "Coffee," he offered, holding out a tin cup. "Please." They drank in companionable silence, the morning chill slowly burning away as the sun rose higher. Thea felt surprisingly rested despite her late night, and she realized with some surprise that she had actually felt safe enough to sleep deeply with Warren nearby. That realization bothered her more than it should have. "I should get moving," she said, setting down her empty cup. "I want to reach Granite by afternoon." Warren nodded. "I am heading that way myself. We could travel together if you want." Thea's immediate instinct was to refuse, but she caught herself. The trail ahead was still long, and there was safety in numbers. Besides, he was going to Granite anyway. It was not as if he was going out of his way. "All right," she said. "That would be acceptable." They broke camp efficiently, and soon both were on the trail heading north. Warren rode his large roan alongside Thea's wagon, keeping pace with the slower vehicle without complaint. The morning air was cool and fresh, and the scenery was breathtaking. Towering pines, rocky outcroppings, and distant peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat. "How long have you lived up here?" Thea asked, surprising herself with the question. "5 years, give or take." "I came west after the war, looking for something different. Found a good spot with water and shelter, built a cabin, and stayed." "You fought in the war?" "Yes." The single word carried weight, and Thea did not press. She had known many men who had fought in the Civil War, and none of them wanted to talk about it much. "It must be hard, living alone all winter," she said instead. Warren shrugged. "I prepare well. I have enough dried meat and supplies to last, and I keep busy with traps and maintenance. The solitude does not bother me." "Do you ever get lonely?" He glanced at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Sometimes, but loneliness is the price of peace in my experience." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clop of hooves on the packed earth trail. "What will you do if the claim is worthless?" Warren asked eventually. Thea had been asking herself the same question for weeks. "I do not know. Try to find work somewhere, I suppose. I can cook and clean and manage accounts. I am good with numbers." "Those skills are valuable in a mining town. You could probably find work easily enough in Granite." "Maybe." The truth was, Thea had no real plan beyond assessing the claim. Her husband, Robert Turner, had been a dreamer and a fool, constantly chasing the next big strike while squandering what little money they had. When he died in a mining accident, Thea had discovered they were deep in debt. She had sold everything they owned except the wagon and horses to pay off what she could, but there were still creditors circling. The mining claim was her last hope, however slim. If there was any gold there, any value at all, she might be able to start over with something resembling security. If not, she would be starting from nothing. The thought terrified her, but she refused to show it. "I have heard Granite is a rough town," Warren said. "Mostly miners and prospectors with all that entails. You should be careful." "I can take care of myself." "I know you can." "I am just saying, be cautious anyway." Thea found herself oddly touched by his concern. "Thank you. I will." They stopped briefly at midday to rest the horses and eat a quick meal of dried meat and hardtack. Warren shared his provisions without comment, and Thea found herself accepting without the same level of resistance she had shown the day before. Something had shifted between them, some invisible line crossed. They were not quite friends, but they were no longer strangers either. "What is your plan once you reach Granite?" Thea asked as they prepared to continue. "I have a few merchants who buy my furs and meat. I will sell what I have, stock up on supplies I cannot make or trap myself, and head back to my cabin. The whole trip usually takes about 2 days." "And then you go back to being alone." Warren smiled slightly. "That is the general idea. Does it truly not bother you?" He considered the question carefully. "It bothers me less than the alternative. I am not good with people, Thea. I never have been. I say the wrong things, I am too blunt, and I have no patience for the games people play. Up in the mountains, I do not have to pretend to be something I am not." Thea understood that sentiment more than she wanted to admit. "I know what you mean. I thought you might." They reached Granite in mid-afternoon, emerging from the forest trail to find the town sprawled along a wide creek that gave it its name. It was larger than Thea had expected, with 2 main streets lined with buildings in various states of completion and repair. The sound of hammering and sawing filled the air, along with the rumble of stamp mills processing ore from the nearby mines. Granite was a town in full boom, and it showed. Men filled the streets, most of them rough-looking miners in dirty work clothes. The few women Thea spotted were either obvious prostitutes or hard-faced wives who looked like they had aged decades beyond their years. "The land office is on the main street," Warren said, gesturing ahead. "If you want to check on your claim." "Thank you." Thea hesitated, then added, "For everything. The help with the wagon, the company on the road. I appreciate it more than I can say." Warren met her eyes, and Thea felt that strange flutter in her chest again. "You are welcome. If you need anything while you are in town, I will be at the Silver Bell trading post most of today. It is the large building with the green door." "I will remember that." They parted ways at the edge of town, Warren heading toward the trading district while Thea navigated her wagon toward the land office. She felt an unexpected pang as she watched him ride away, his broad back disappearing into the crowd. The land office was a cramped building stuffed with filing cabinets and presided over by a balding man with spectacles who introduced himself as Mr. Guthrie. "I need to check on a claim," Thea said. "It belonged to my late husband, Robert Turner." Mr. Guthrie shuffled through papers with maddening slowness. Finally, he pulled out a document and scanned it. "Ah, yes, the Turner claim, up on the western slope about 3 miles from town. Your husband had it registered properly before his death. Has anyone else tried to file on it since?" "No, it is still in your name as the surviving spouse. You planning to work it?" Thea hesitated. "I want to inspect it first, see if there is anything worth pursuing." Mr. Guthrie gave her a skeptical look. "Begging your pardon, madam, but that claim has been worked over pretty thoroughly. Your husband was out there regular for 2 years and never found more than dust. Most folks figure the vein is tapped out if there ever was one." Thea's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "Nevertheless, I would like to see it for myself." "Suit yourself. You need directions." "Please." Armed with a rough map and rapidly fading hope, Thea left the land office and stood on the crowded street, unsure of her next move. She needed a place to stay while she investigated the claim, but money was tight. The few hotels she had passed looked expensive, and she suspected the cheaper boarding houses would be rowdy and possibly dangerous for a woman alone. Almost without deciding to, she found herself walking toward the Silver Bell trading post. The building was indeed large, with a green door standing open to the afternoon air. Inside, the space was crammed with goods: barrels of flour and sugar, tools hanging from the walls, piles of furs awaiting shipment, and racks of preserved foods. The smell of tobacco and leather and coffee filled the air. Warren stood at the counter, negotiating with a portly man in a stained apron. He looked up as Thea entered, and his face broke into that transformative smile. "Thea, did you find the land office?" "I did." She moved closer, acutely aware of the curious looks from other customers. "The claim is still mine, but the clerk thinks it is worthless." Something flickered in Warren's expression. "Are you going to check it anyway?" "Yes, I need to know for certain." Warren turned back to the merchant. "We will settle up now, Jake." Money and goods exchanged hands, and then Warren was guiding Thea back outside with a gentle hand on her elbow. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through her arm. "I am going to ask you something, and I want you to truly consider it instead of immediately refusing," Warren said once they were on the street. "All right." Thea felt her defenses rise automatically. "What is it?" "Let me help you check the claim. I know mining, I know the area, and I can provide protection if you need it. You should not go out there alone. I can manage." "Thea." Warren turned to face her fully, his blue-gray eyes serious. "This is not about whether you can manage. This is about what is smart and safe. Mining claims outside of town, especially ones that are supposedly empty, attract trouble. Claim jumpers, Desperate men looking for easy targets, predators both human and animal. Please, let me help you. Every instinct Thea possessed screamed at her to refuse, to maintain her independence, to prove she needed no one. But she thought about the long ride to the claim, the work of inspecting it properly, the danger Warren described. She thought about how he had helped her with the wagon without asking for anything in return, how he had shared his food and kept her safe on the trail. Most of all, she thought about the alternative, going out there alone, vulnerable and probably failing anyway. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why do you keep helping me? Warren's expression softened. Because you remind me that not everyone in this world is just surviving. Some people are still fighting, still trying. And because when I look at you, I see someone who deserves better than the hand she has been dealt. Maybe I cannot fix that, but I can make a few things easier. Thea felt her eyes sting with tears she absolutely refused to shed. I do not know how to accept help gracefully. I noticed. But you are learning. Despite herself, Thea smiled. All right, yes, I would appreciate your help checking the claim. Good. We should go tomorrow morning early. It is too late to start today. Do you have a place to stay tonight? Not yet. I was going to look for a boarding house. Warren frowned. Most of them are not suitable for a woman alone. There is a widow named Mrs. Patterson who rents rooms on the north end of town. She is respectable and charges fair rates. I can show you where she lives. That would be helpful, Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a stern-faced woman in her 50s who ran a tight ship but had kind eyes. She looked Thea over carefully, then quoted a rate that was just within Thea's budget. I take no nonsense in my house, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. No drinking, no visitors in rooms, and everyone at meals on time or you go hungry. But you will be safe here and the bed is clean. That sounds perfect, Thea said with genuine relief. Good. You look like you could use a safe place and a decent meal. Supper is at 6. Warren helped Thea unload her essential items from the wagon, which they arranged to stable at a nearby livery. The work went quickly with his help, and by the time they finished, the sun was beginning to sink toward the western peaks. I will meet you here at dawn, Warren said. Dress for rough travel and bring water. The claim is uphill most of the way. I will be ready. Warren lingered for a moment, and Thea had the strange sense that he wanted to say something else, but whatever it was remained unspoken. See you tomorrow, Thea. Tomorrow. She watched him walk away, his long hair catching the golden light, and wondered what she was getting herself into. That night, after a satisfying meal of pot roast and vegetables, Thea lay in the small but clean room Mrs. Patterson had provided and stared at the ceiling. She thought about Warren, about his kindness and his strength, and the way he seemed to understand her without her having to explain. She thought about the claim and what she might find there, about her uncertain future and her complicated past. Mostly, though, she thought about how it had felt to accept help, to share the burden of her struggles with someone else, even briefly. It terrified her, that small taste of connection. It made her feel vulnerable in ways that had nothing to do with physical danger. But it also made her feel something she had not experienced in years. Hope. She fell asleep with that thought, and for the first time in months, she did not dream of being alone. Warren arrived at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house just as the sun was coloring the eastern sky pink and gold. He sat astride his roan, and he had brought a second horse, a sturdy gray mare that looked mountain-bred. Thea came out dressed in her most practical clothing, split riding skirt, worn boots, and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her face from the sun. She carried a canvas pack with water and some food. I thought you might prefer riding to walking, Warren said, gesturing to the mare. Lucy here is gentle but steady on rough terrain. That is very thoughtful. Thank you. Warren dismounted and helped Thea onto the mare, his hand steadying her as she settled into the saddle. The brief contact sent that now familiar jolt through her system, and she saw from Warren's expression that he felt it too. They rode out of town heading west, following a rough track that climbed steadily into the hills. The morning air was cool and smelled of pine and wild sage. Birds called from the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a stream tumbled over rocks. "It is beautiful out here," Thea said, taking in the scenery. "It is. I never get tired of it." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the horses picking their way up the rocky trail with sure-footed confidence. Thea found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride, her body adjusting to Lucy's gait. "Can I ask you something?" she said eventually. "Of course." "Why did you never marry? Live a more conventional life?" Warren was quiet for so long that Thea thought he might not answer. Then, slowly, he began to speak. "I was engaged once before the war. Her name was Emily. She was beautiful and proper and everything a man was supposed to want. But when I came back from the fighting, I was different. The things I had seen, the things I had done, they changed me. Emily tried to understand, but she could not. How could she? She had been safe at home while I was wading through blood and death." He paused, his jaw tight. "She eventually broke off the engagement. Said I was too damaged, too angry, too unpredictable. She was probably right. I scared her and I hated myself for that. So I left, came west, and decided I was better off alone. At least alone, I could not hurt anyone or disappoint them." Thea's heart ached at the raw pain in his voice. "I am sorry that happened to you. It was a long time ago. Pain does not fade just because time passes." Warren looked at her with something like surprise. "No, it does not. My husband used to say I was too cold, too unfeeling," Thea found herself confessing. "He wanted a wife who would fawn over him, who would support his ridiculous dreams without question. When I tried to be practical, tried to point out the flaws in his plans, he said I was crushing his spirit. By the end, we barely spoke. His death was almost a relief, and I hate myself for feeling that way. You should not hate yourself for being honest about a bad situation. People say I should mourn longer, that 6 months is not enough. But I cannot mourn something that caused me more pain than joy." Warren reached over and briefly touched her hand where it rested on the saddle. The gesture was simple but profound. "Then do not. Grieve the life you wished you had, maybe, but do not waste tears on what actually was." They crested a ridge and Warren pointed ahead. The claim should be just over that next rise. The Turner claim, when they reached it, was a dispiriting sight. The entrance to the mine shaft was partially collapsed, with rotting timber supports sagging dangerously. Tailings from the digging formed gray piles around the entrance, and scattered tools lay rusting in the weeds. A small shack that must have served as Robert's base camp leaned at a precarious angle, its roof caved in on one side. Thea dismounted and stood staring at the scene, her last hopes crumbling. This was not a working mine that just needed effort. This was an abandoned failure. "Thea," Warren said gently, coming to stand beside her, "it is worthless." Her voice came out flat, emotionless. "There is nothing here. Let me check the shaft before we give up completely. Sometimes there are areas that were missed or not fully explored. You do not have to humor me. I am not. I have some experience with mining and I know what to look for. Let me at least give you a thorough assessment." Thea nodded numbly. She watched as Warren examined the shaft entrance, testing the timbers and peering into the darkness. He moved with cautious confidence, clearly knowing what he was doing. After a few minutes, he stepped back, his expression grim. "The main shaft is played out. Your husband followed the vein as far as it went, which was not very far. There is a small side tunnel that looks like he started but never finished, but I would need better light and tools to explore it safely. Even then, the odds of finding anything significant are low. So it is definitely worthless. As a working claim, yes, you might be able to sell it to someone who does not know better, but that would be dishonest. Thea appreciated his bluntness even as it crushed her. Then that is it. My last option gone. She walked away from Warren, toward the edge of the clearing, and stood looking out over the valley below. Granite was barely visible through the trees, a smudge of buildings and smoke. Beyond it, the mountains rolled away in waves of green and gray, beautiful and indifferent to her troubles. She had tried so hard to be strong, to handle everything alone, to prove she did not need anyone. And what had it gotten her? A worthless claim, dwindling resources, and a future that looked increasingly bleak. For the first time since Robert's death, Thea felt the full weight of her situation crash down on her. She was alone, nearly broke and out of options. The tears she had been holding back for months finally came, silent and hot, streaming down her face despite her best efforts to stop them. She heard Warren approach but did not turn around. His presence settled beside her, solid and steady. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I knew it was unlikely. I just hoped. Hope is not a weakness. It feels like one right now." They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Warren spoke, his voice careful. "What if I told you that you have another option? What option could I possibly have? You could stay in Granite, find work, build a life here. The town is growing and they need people with your skills. I have no money for lodging beyond a few more days. I have no references for work. I have nothing." "That is not true." Warren turned to face her, and his expression was intense. "You have strength and intelligence and determination. Those things matter more than money or references. That is easy to say when you are not the one facing destitution." "You are right. It is easy for me to say." Warren took a deep breath, and Thea saw him steeling himself for something. "But what if you did not have to face it alone?" Thea's heart began to pound. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you could come stay at my cabin. Just temporarily, just until you figure out your next step. I have plenty of space, plenty of food. You would be safe there, and it would give you time to plan without the pressure of running out of money." The offer shocked Thea into silence. She stared at Warren, trying to read his expression. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious. Warren, I cannot just move into your home. What would people think? What would you expect? People can think whatever they want. As for expectations, I have none beyond basic companionship and maybe some help with chores if you are willing." "I am not asking anything inappropriate, Thea. I am offering you a safe place to catch your breath." "Why?" The question burst out of her, sharp with confusion and fear. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" Warren's jaw worked for a moment, and Thea saw a flash of vulnerability cross his rugged features. "Because I am tired of being alone. Because you are the first person in 5 years who has made me remember what it is like to care about someone. And because I think maybe you are tired of being alone too, even if you will not admit it." The honesty of his words stripped away Thea's remaining defenses. She wanted to argue, to insist she was fine alone, but she could not anymore. "I am scared," she whispered. "Of me. Of this. Of depending on someone again. Of what it might mean." Warren stepped closer, near enough that Thea could feel the warmth radiating from his large frame. "I am scared too. But I think being scared together might be better than being safe and alone. At least it is worth trying." Thea looked up at him, at his earnest blue-gray eyes and his strong, scarred hands and his wild mountain man appearance that should have frightened her, but somehow made her feel safer than she had in years. "All right," she heard herself say. "Yes, I will come stay with you, temporarily." The smile that broke across Warren's face was like sunrise, bright and impossible to look away from. Temporarily. Agreed. They returned to Granite to collect Thea's belongings and settle her account with Mrs. Patterson. The widow gave Warren a sharp look but seemed satisfied by whatever she saw in his face. "You treat this girl right, Warren Xander," Mrs. Patterson said sternly, "or you will answer to me." "Yes, madam," Warren replied with perfect seriousness. They loaded Thea's few possessions onto the packhorse Warren had brought, and by mid-afternoon they were riding north toward the high country where Warren made his home. The trail climbed steadily, winding through increasingly dense forest. They crossed crystal streams and skirted meadows bursting with wildflowers. The air grew cooler and thinner, flavored with pine and snow from the distant peaks. "How much farther?" Thea asked as they forded yet another stream. "About another mile. We are on my land now. You own all this." "I claimed it and improved it. It is mine by right of homestead. Not that it matters much out here. There is more land than anyone could ever use." They emerged from the trees into a large clearing dominated by a sturdy log cabin. It was larger than Thea had expected, with a stone chimney at one end and a covered porch running along the front. Behind it, she could see a small barn and storage sheds. "You built all this yourself?" she asked, awed. "Mostly. I traded work with some neighbors for help with the roof and the chimney. But yes, most of it is my own labor." The pride in his voice was unmistakable, and Thea understood it. This was Warren's kingdom, built with his own hands, a testament to his skill and determination. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable. The main room held a large stone fireplace, a table with benches, and several comfortable chairs. A kitchen area occupied one corner, complete with a cast iron stove and shelves stocked with provisions. A ladder led to a sleeping loft above. "You can have the loft," Warren said, following her gaze. "I built it for storage mostly, but there is a good mattress up there and plenty of blankets. I will sleep down here by the fire. I do not want to put you out of your own bed. You are not. I often sleep down here anyway. I like tending the fire through the night." Thea climbed the ladder to inspect the loft. It was cozy and private, with a small window looking out over the clearing. The mattress was indeed good, stuffed with fresh straw and covered with quilts that looked handmade. "This is lovely," she called down. "I am glad you approve." They spent the rest of the afternoon settling Thea into the cabin. Warren was unfailingly respectful, giving her space and privacy while still being helpful. By evening, Thea felt almost at home in the rustic space. Warren cooked dinner, a hearty meal of venison stew and fresh bread that he had apparently baked himself. Thea was impressed despite herself. "You are very self-sufficient," she observed as they ate. "I have to be, living out here. I learned to cook, so preserve food, everything necessary to survive on my own." "Do you ever miss having people around?" Warren considered the question. "Sometimes. Mostly in winter when the snow is so deep that I cannot get out for weeks at a time. But then, I remember what it was like living in town, dealing with gossip and expectations and constant noise, and I appreciate the solitude again." "I understand that. After Robert died, people kept coming by to offer condolences and advice. Everyone had an opinion about what I should do, how I should feel, how long I should mourn. It was suffocating. People mean well, usually. They just do not know when to leave you alone." They cleaned up together after dinner, falling into an easy rhythm. Thea washed while Warren dried, and she found herself enjoying the simple domesticity of it. When had she last shared comfortable silence with someone while doing mundane tasks? As night fell, Warren built up the fire and settled into one of the chairs with a book. Thea was surprised to see he had a small collection of volumes on a shelf near the fireplace. "You like to read?" she asked. "I do. It helps pass the long winter nights. You are welcome to borrow anything." Thea selected a volume of poetry and curled up in the other chair. They read in companionable quiet, the only sounds the crackling fire and the occasional turn of a page. It was peaceful in a way Thea had not experienced in years. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with her. "I think I will turn in. Sleep well, Thea." In the loft, Thea changed into her nightdress and slipped under the quilts. Through the floorboards, she could hear Warren moving around below, banking the fire and preparing his own bed. The sounds were comforting rather than intrusive. She lay in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the forest and the cabin settling around her. This was not what she had planned. She had come west looking for independence, for a way to stand on her own. Instead, she had found herself dependent on a virtual stranger's kindness. Yet it did not feel the way she had feared. Warren did not make her feel weak or incapable. He did not lord his help over her or expect her to be grateful in specific ways. He simply offered what he could and let her choose whether to accept it. That, Thea realized, was the difference. She had chosen this. She was here by her own decision, not because she had no other options, but because this option felt right. The realization settled something inside her. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her. The days that followed developed their own rhythm. Thea woke early, as did Warren, and they shared breakfast before dividing up the day's tasks. Warren taught her how to check his trap lines, how to preserve meat properly, how to identify useful plants in the forest. Thea took over much of the cooking and mending, tasks she actually enjoyed when they were not performed under resentment and obligation. They talked while they worked, sharing stories from their pasts, their hopes and fears and dreams. Thea learned that Warren had grown up in Pennsylvania, the youngest of 5 brothers. He had been close to his family before the war but had lost contact after. He had been at Gettysburg, at Antietam, at battles whose names still made hardened men flinch. Warren learned that Thea had been orphaned young and raised by an aunt who viewed her as an obligation. She had married Robert at 18, desperate to escape her aunt's home, only to find she had traded one prison for another. She loved numbers and organization, the way problems could be solved through careful planning. She dreamed of someday having enough security to simply breathe without constant fear. As the weeks passed, Thea found herself changing. The constant tension she had carried for years began to ease. She laughed more, smiled more. The shadows under her eyes faded and the hard lines around her mouth softened. Warren changed too. He talked more, opened up about his feelings and thoughts. The guarded, isolated mountain man gradually revealed the kind, thoughtful person underneath. They were sitting on the porch one evening in early September, watching the sun set over the mountains when Warren suddenly spoke. "I am glad you are here." Thea turned to look at him. "I am glad I am here too." "I mean it, Thea. These past weeks have been the best I have known in years. Having you here, talking with you, just being near you, it makes everything better." Thea's heart began to pound. She knew what was happening, had felt it building for days. They were moving towards something, something that both excited and terrified her. "Warren," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I know we agreed this was temporary. I know you came here just to figure things out, but I need you to know that I do not want it to be temporary. I want you to stay, not as a guest or someone I am helping out of pity, but as someone who belongs here, with me. Warren, I do not know if I can do this. What if I disappoint you? What if I am not enough?" He reached out and took her hand, his large palm warm and calloused against her skin. "You could never disappoint me. You are already more than enough. How can you be sure? We have only known each other a few weeks." "I knew after the first night. when you were too stubborn to accept help but brave enough to do it anyway. When you sat across the fire from me and admitted you were afraid but did not let that fear stop you. I knew then that you were someone special, someone worth knowing. Tears pricked Thea's eyes. I am afraid of needing you, of losing myself in someone else again. Then do not lose yourself. Keep being exactly who you are, strong and stubborn and smart. I do not want you to change. I just want you to be here, living your life alongside mine. What if I am not ready for this? Warren's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. Then we go slow. We take whatever time you need. I'm not going anywhere, Thea. She looked at him, this massive, gentle man who had somehow become essential to her happiness in such a short time. She thought about the alternative, leaving, going back to being alone, rebuilding the walls around her heart. The thought made her feel cold and empty. I want to try, she whispered. I am scared, but I want to try. Warren's smile was brilliant. That is all I need to hear. He leaned in slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. When his lips met hers, the kiss was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Thea felt something inside her chest crack open, years of ice melting in an instant. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Warren rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I will spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice, he murmured. I know you will. They sat together as darkness fell, hands intertwined, watching the stars emerge one by one. For the first time in years, Thea felt at peace. The future was still uncertain, but it was an uncertainty she was facing with someone by her side. That made all the difference. September turned to October, and the aspen trees blazed gold and red against the evergreen pines. The nights grew colder, and Warren began preparing in earnest for winter. Thea helped, learning how to stack firewood properly, how to store vegetables in the root cellar, how to prepare meat for smoking. They worked side by side during the days and sat close together in the evenings, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's presence. Warren kissed her often now, tender touches that never pushed for more than she was ready to give. He seemed content to simply be near her, and Thea loved him for his patience. She did love him, she realized. The realization came one morning as she watched him split firewood, his powerful shoulders flexing with each swing of the axe. She loved his strength and gentleness, his honesty and integrity, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. Warren, she said that evening as they sat before the fire. Yes, I love you. He turned to her, his eyes wide with surprise and joy. You do, I do. I fought it for a long time, but I cannot fight it anymore. I love you. Warren pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I love you too. God, Thea, I love you so much. They kissed with new urgency, years of loneliness and longing pouring out between them. When Warren pulled back, his breathing was ragged. Marry me, he said. Thea blinked. What, marry me? I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few months, but I have never been more certain of anything. I want you to be my wife, Thea. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy. Thea's mind raced. Marriage. She had sworn she would never marry again after Robert, never put herself under someone else's control. But Warren was not Robert. He had proven over and over that he respected her autonomy, her decisions, her strength. Yes, she heard herself say. Yes, I will marry you. Warren whooped with joy, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. Thea found herself laughing, really laughing, her happiness spilling over in a way she had not experienced since childhood. They were married 3 weeks later in Granite, with Mrs. Patterson and the trading post owner serving as witnesses. Thea wore a simple blue dress that Warren had insisted on buying for her, and Warren wore clean clothes and had trimmed his beard for the occasion. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Thea felt her heart soar. That night, in the cabin they now officially shared, Warren made love to her with such tenderness and care that Thea wept. This was nothing like the perfunctory coupling she had endured with Robert. This was connection, intimacy, two people joining together in joy rather than obligation. "Are you all right?" Warren asked, concerned by her tears. "I am perfect," Thea whispered. "This is perfect." Winter came with a vengeance in late November, burying the mountains under feet of snow. Thea and Warren settled into the cabin, cozy and warm while the world outside turned white and wild. They played cards, read books, cooked elaborate meals just for the pleasure of it. They made love and talked and planned their future together. "I want to expand the cabin come spring," Warren said one evening. "Add another room, maybe a proper bedroom so we do not have to use the loft." "That sounds wonderful. We could also build a better workshop for you. Your tools are scattered everywhere. And we should put in a proper vegetable garden, a big one so we can preserve more food." They dreamed together, weaving plans for a life that felt more real and solid than anything Thea had experienced before. In February, Thea realized she was pregnant. She waited a few days to be certain before telling Warren, nervous about his reaction. But when she finally shared the news, his joy was unmistakable. "A baby," he breathed, his hand settling gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled. I am terrified too. What if I am a terrible mother? Warren pulled her close. You will be an amazing mother. You are strong and smart and loving. Our child will be lucky to have you. The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Thea's fears. Warren fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more and do less. Thea found his overprotectiveness both endearing and exasperating. "I am pregnant, not dying," she said when he tried to carry her over a puddle. "I know. I just want to take care of you. You do take care of me every single day, but you have to let me take care of myself too." Warren nodded, chastened. "You are right. I am sorry. I just love you so much, and the thought of anything happening to you scares me." Thea softened. "Nothing is going to happen to me. We are both going to be fine." Spring arrived with a rush of snowmelt and wildflowers. Warren began the work of expanding the cabin while Thea focused on preparing for the baby. She sewed tiny clothes and blankets, arranged the loft into a nursery, and tried not to panic about the reality of bringing a new life into the world. In June, as the mountains bloomed in riotous color, Thea went into labor. Warren rode to town to fetch Mrs. Patterson, who had agreed to serve as midwife. The labor was long and difficult, but finally, as dawn broke over the peaks, Thea delivered a healthy baby boy. "He is perfect," Warren whispered, cradling his son with surprising gentleness for someone with such large hands. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas, after Thea's father. Thomas Warren Xander, born into the mountains his parents loved, surrounded by wilderness and safety and, above all, love. The months after Thomas's birth were exhausting and wonderful. Thea had never been so tired or so happy. Warren was a devoted father, taking on every task from changing diapers to walking the floor with a crying baby. They worked as a team, supporting each other through the challenges of new parenthood. "I never knew I could be this happy," Thea said one evening as they sat together on the porch, Thomas sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Even with all the sleepless nights and chaos, I have never felt so content." Warren put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Neither have I. You gave me everything I did not know I was missing. You saved me, you know. When my wagon wheel broke that day, I was so lost and desperate. I thought I had nothing left to hope for. Then you came along and showed me there was another way to live. You saved me too. I was just existing up here, going through the motions of survival. You taught me how to live again, how to open my heart. You were brave enough to accept help when you needed it, and that let me be brave enough to offer it. We saved each other. Thomas stirred in Thea's arms, making small mewling sounds. She adjusted him gently, marveling at his tiny features. He had Warren's blue-gray eyes and her dark hair, a perfect blend of both of them. "What do you think he will be when he grows up?" Warren asked. "I do not know." "Whatever he wants to be. We will make sure he has choices, opportunities. He will never feel trapped or limited." "Agreed. Though I hope he keeps the mountains in his heart. This land gets into your blood." Thea looked out over the clearing, over the meadow and forest and distant peaks that had become her home. Warren was right. This place had worked its way into her soul, as had the man beside her. She had come to these mountains broken and desperate, determined to need no one. Instead, she had found someone who saw her struggle and helped anyway, who respected her strength while offering his own, who loved her completely without asking her to be anything other than herself. The years that followed were full and rich. Warren expanded his hunting and trapping business, making regular trips to Granite to trade. Thea started keeping his accounts and helping manage the business side of things, her talent with numbers proving invaluable. Together, they built a prosperous, comfortable life. Thomas grew into a sturdy, cheerful boy who loved exploring the forest with his father. When he was 3, Thea gave birth to a daughter they named Grace. 2 years after that came another boy, Samuel. The cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family with new rooms and a larger kitchen. Through it all, Thea and Warren's love for each other deepened and matured. They had their disagreements, of course, moments of frustration or misunderstanding. But they had learned to talk through their problems, to listen to each other, to remember that they were on the same team. One evening, almost 10 years after that fateful day when Thea's wagon wheel had broken, they sat together on the porch watching their children play in the meadow. Thomas was 12 now, teaching his younger siblings how to track deer. Grace was 7, serious and studious, already showing Thea's aptitude for numbers. Samuel was 5, all energy and laughter. "You ever regret it?" Warren asked. "Giving up your independence, staying here instead of going back to try to make it on your own?" Thea considered the question carefully. "I did not give up my independence. I chose to share my life with someone who makes it better. That is not the same thing." "True. Do you regret asking a stubborn woman who refused your help to come live with you?" Warren laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Never. That stubborn woman gave me a reason to be more than a hermit hiding from the world. She gave me a family, a purpose, a life worth living." Thea leaned into his solid warmth, feeling his arm come around her shoulders in that familiar, comforting gesture. "I was so afraid of needing someone. I thought independence meant being alone. I did not understand that real strength is knowing when to accept help, when to let someone stand beside you. You taught me that too. I had convinced myself that isolation was safety, that if I did not let anyone close, I could not be hurt again. But being safe and being alive are not the same thing. No, they are not." Thomas called out something, and they watched as he pointed out tracks in the dirt to his siblings. Warren smiled with obvious pride. "We made good people," he said. "We did. Though I think that has more to do with you than me. You are an amazing father. Only because I had an amazing woman show me what love and family could look like." Thea turned to face him, reaching up to touch his bearded face. The gray was starting to show in his hair and beard now, distinguished against the dark. The lines around his eyes had deepened, but the kindness in them remained unchanged. "I love you, Warren Xander, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. I love you too, Thea. You are my heart, my home, my everything." They kissed, gentle and sweet, the kind of kiss that spoke of years together and years still to come. When they pulled apart, Grace was standing at the foot of the porch steps, watching them with a disgusted expression. "You two are always kissing," she complained. Thea laughed. "We are, is that a problem? It is embarrassing. Wait until you are older, you might understand it better then." Grace made a face and ran back to join her brothers. Warren chuckled, pulling Thea close again. "I hope she finds someone who makes her as happy as you make me," he said. "I hope all our children find that. But more than that, I hope they know they do not need to choose between independence and connection. They can be strong on their own and stronger together. With you as their mother, how could they not learn that?" The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The children's laughter rang out across the meadow, bright and joyful. Inside the cabin, a fire crackled in the hearth, waiting to warm them when they came in for the evening. Thea looked around at the life she had built, at the family she had never expected to have, at the home that had somehow become more real than anything she had known before. She thought about that day when her wagon wheel broke, when she had been at her lowest point, too proud to ask for help. She thought about Warren, seeing her struggle and helping anyway. About how his kindness had cracked open the walls around her heart. About how love had found her when she least expected it and changed everything. "Thank you," she whispered. Warren looked down at her. "For what?" "For seeing me. For helping me even when I pushed you away. For loving me enough to wait until I was ready to love you back." "You never have to thank me for that. Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done." They sat together as the stars emerged one by one, watching over their children, their home, their life. The mountains rose around them, ancient and steadfast, sheltering the family that had taken root in their shadow. Thea Turner had come to these mountains alone, determined to need no one, to survive on her strength alone. Instead, she had found Warren Xander, a man who understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept help. Together, they had built something neither could have created alone. A life full of love and laughter, challenge and comfort, independence and connection intertwined. She had been the woman who never asked for help. He had been the mountain man who helped anyway because he saw her struggle. And from that beginning, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a love that would endure through all the years to come. Years continued to pass in the mountain home that Warren and Thea had built together. The children grew, as children do, each finding their own path in the world. Thomas, at 18, decided to become a guide for settlers crossing the mountains. He had his father's love of the wilderness and his mother's practical mind for planning safe routes. Warren taught him everything he knew about surviving in the high country, and Thea made sure he understood the importance of treating people with kindness and respect. Grace surprised them both by developing a passion for teaching. At 15, she began tutoring children in the mining camps around Granite, riding down once a week with either Warren or Thomas as escort. She had a gift for explaining difficult concepts and a patience that rivaled her father's. She talked about starting a proper school one day, and her parents had no doubt she would do exactly that. Samuel, now 13, was still trying to figure out who he wanted to be. He loved working with his hands like his father, but also had a creative streak that expressed itself in whittling and drawing. Warren encouraged all of it, remembering his own journey to find where he belonged. Thea stood in the doorway of their expanded cabin, watching Warren work with Samuel on building a new shed. Her husband moved with slightly less fluidity than he had at 30, but he was still strong, still vital. Gray now dominated his hair and beard, but to Thea, he had never been more handsome. "Mother, can I talk to you about something?" Grace appeared at Thea's elbow, her expression serious. "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" They settled onto the porch bench together. Grace fidgeted with her skirt, uncharacteristically nervous. "There is a man who has been helping me with the school," she began. "His name is Daniel. He is the minister's son, just moved here from Denver. He is smart and kind, and he wants to help build a real schoolhouse in granite." Thea felt her heart squeeze. Her daughter was growing up. "And you like him?" "I think so. But I do not know if I am ready for that. I want to teach, Mother. I want to make a difference." "What if getting involved with someone ruins that?" Thea took her daughter's hand. "Can I tell you something I learned, please? When I was your age, I thought independence meant being alone. I thought needing someone made you weak. I married your fathers. I married my first husband because I wanted to escape, not because I loved him. It was a mistake that cost me years of unhappiness. But then you met Father. Then I met your father. And I was so scared, Grace. I was terrified of needing anyone, of giving up control of my life. But your father taught me that love does not mean losing yourself. It means finding someone who helps you become more of who you truly are." Grace listened intently. "How do you know if someone is like that?" "You know because they support your dreams instead of trying to change them. They respect your strength while offering their own. They make you feel safe to be completely yourself." Thea smiled. "Does Daniel make you feel that way?" "I think so. When I talk about the school, he gets excited with me. He wants to help make it happen, not take it over or tell me what to do." "Then maybe he is worth getting to know better. Just take your time. You are only 15. You have years to figure out what you want." "Were you very young when you got married the first time?" Thea hesitated, then decided her daughter deserved honesty. "I was 18, but I was not ready. I did it for the wrong reasons. When I married your father, I was 24 and knew exactly what I was choosing." "That made all the difference." Grace nodded thoughtfully. "I will remember that." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Warren and Samuel work. Eventually, Grace spoke again. "You and Father are so happy together. I want that someday, but I want to do things first, you know. I want to accomplish something on my own." "Then do that. Accomplish whatever you dream of. The right person will support those dreams, not get in the way of them. Like Father supports you." "Exactly like that." As evening fell, the family gathered for dinner around the large table Warren had built years ago. The children talked over each other, sharing stories from their day. Warren caught Thea's eye across the table and winked, and she felt the familiar warmth bloom in her chest. After dinner, after the children had gone to their rooms, Thea and Warren sat before the fire as they had done countless times before. "Grace asked me about love today," Thea said. Warren looked up from the knife he was sharpening. "Did she now? She is interested in someone. She wanted to know how to balance wanting her own life with caring for someone else." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth. That the right person makes you stronger, not weaker. That love should add to your life, not limit it." Warren set down the knife and moved to sit beside Thea on the couch. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "You taught me that," he said. "I spent years thinking I could only be whole by being alone. Then you showed up with your broken wagon wheel and your stubborn pride, and everything changed. I was so angry at you for helping me," Thea laughed. "I wanted to prove I did not need anyone. I know. That is why I did it anyway. You reminded me of myself, so determined to be strong that you forgot it was okay to be human." Thea turned to look at him. Even after all these years, his face still made her heart skip. "Do you ever miss it? The solitude, the simplicity of living alone?" "Never. Not once. You and the children are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even when we are loud and chaotic and the house is always full, especially then." Warren kissed her forehead. "Though I will admit, I am also looking forward to when the children are grown and it is just us again. I would like to have you to myself for a while." "That might be nice," Thea agreed. "We could travel, see places we have only read about in books. We could add on to the cabin, make it exactly how we want without worrying about children needing space. We could sleep in on Sundays." Warren laughed. "Now you are just fantasizing." They sat together, dreaming of the future while cherishing the present. Outside, the mountains stood silent and eternal, watching over the family that had found home in their shadow. The seasons turned again and again. Thomas became successful as a guide, eventually marrying a woman named Sarah who loved the mountains as much as he did. They built a cabin not far from Warren and Thea's, raising their own children within sight of their grandparents' home. Grace did start her school, a fine building in granite that served children from all the surrounding mining camps. She married Daniel, the minister's son, when she was 22, and together they dedicated themselves to education and community service. She never gave up her work, and Daniel never asked her to. Samuel discovered his calling in furniture making, his skill with wood becoming legendary throughout the region. He opened a workshop in granite and married a quiet woman named Rebecca who ran a bakery. Their home always smelled of fresh bread and wood shavings. Warren and Thea watched their children build their own lives with pride and joy. They welcomed grandchildren with open arms, their home becoming a gathering place for the growing family. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Warren took Thea on a trip back to the spot where they had first met, where her wagon wheel had broken all those years ago. "This is where my life really began," Thea said, standing on the trail that had been improved and widened over the years. "Mine too," Warren agreed. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I was just existing before you, breathing, surviving, but not truly living. We saved each other that day. We did. And we have been saving each other every day since." Thea looked up at her husband, at the face she loved more with each passing year. His hair was completely gray now, his beard shot through with silver. Deep lines marked his face, evidence of years spent laughing and smiling and living fully. He was in his 50s now, still strong but moving with more care than he once had. She knew she had changed too. Her own dark hair was streaked with gray, and her face showed the marks of time and weather and joy. But Warren looked at her the way he always had, like she was the most beautiful thing in the world. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too. Always have, always will." They stood together on the trail where fate had brought them together, two people who had been too hurt and too proud to believe in love. They had found each other anyway, had built a life that exceeded anything either could have imagined. Thea Turner had been a woman determined never to need anyone. Warren Xander had been a man convinced he was better off alone. But when they met, when he saw her struggle and helped anyway despite her resistance, they had both discovered something essential. That strength comes not from isolation, but from knowing when to reach out and when to hold on. Their love story had begun with a broken wagon wheel and a stubborn woman and a compassionate man. It had grown through patience and understanding, through challenges overcome together, through the daily choice to keep choosing each other. As they walked back to their horses, hand in hand like they had been for 20 years, Thea felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the broken wheel that had stranded her. Gratitude for Warren's kindness in helping despite her pride. Gratitude for the courage to accept that help and everything that came after. The mountains rose around them, unchanging and eternal. But the people who lived in their shadow had changed profoundly, had grown and healed and learned to love. And that love would continue, passing down through generations, a legacy of strength and kindness and the courage to be vulnerable. Thea looked at Warren, at the man who had seen her at her worst and helped anyway, who had loved her into becoming her best self. She squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back, and in that simple gesture was everything they had built together. They rode home as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Their children and grandchildren would be waiting, ready to celebrate the anniversary of two people who had found each other against all odds. The cabin would be full of noise and laughter and love. It was exactly the life they had built together, and it was more than enough. It was everything. And as they crested the final hill and saw their home spread out below them, Thea knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice all those years ago. She had been the woman who never asked for help. Warren had been the mountain man who helped anyway. And from that beginning had grown a love story for the ages, one that would echo through their family for generations to come. The end of their story was really just another beginning, another chapter in a life lived fully and loved completely. And that, Thea thought as Warren helped her down from her horse, his hand still strong and sure, was the best ending of all.